She sat down next to me on the train, in the empty seat I had intentionally guarded with my backpack. Her hands were trembling slightly. She took a deep breath, looked me dead in the eye, and said the 7 words that would completely dismantle and then rebuild my entire life. "You're my husband for the next 2 hours." I just stared at her. I didn't say a thing. I just watched the frantic hope in her eyes, the way her jaw was clenched, the way she was holding herself together by a single fraying thread. And I, a man who hadn't made a real decision for himself in 3 years, simply nodded. That is how I met my wife. But to understand why a man like me would agree to a thing like that, you need to understand the man I was before she sat down. Let me back up. My name is Leo. I'm 34 years old, and I'm the superintendent of a quiet, pre-war apartment building on a tree-lined street that most people hurry past on their way to somewhere more important. It's a good job for a ghost. And for the last 3 years, that's exactly what I'd been. A ghost. A machine made of quiet routines and predictable tasks. Fix a leaky faucet in 3B. Snake a drain in 5A. Replace a dead light bulb in the lobby. Patch the drywall in the hallway where a tenant's kid got a little too enthusiastic with a toy truck. I was good at it. I was competent. Reliable. Mr. Kaplan in 4C called me the best super he'd had in 20 years. He didn't know the secret. The secret was that I was good at it because it was all I had. The building was my world. The low hum of the boiler in the basement was my heartbeat. The creak of the floorboards was the only conversation I was interested in. I didn't have friends over. I didn't date. I didn't even want to. The part of me that wanted things had been switched off like a circuit breaker. I'd flipped myself. It happened the day my father died. He wasn't just my father. He was my anchor, my blueprint for how to be a man. He ran a small engine repair shop, his hands always smelling of grease and gasoline. He was a quiet man, like me, but his quiet was full of warmth, not emptiness. He had these little rules, these principles he lived by. He'd dispense them while cleaning a carburetor or tightening a bolt. "Leo," he told me once, when I was 16 and heartbroken over a girl who'd left me for the captain of the football team. "Some things in this world you don't get by forcing them. You don't get them by breaking them down." He held up a delicate gear from a watch he was fixing for a neighbor. "You can't hammer this into place," he'd said, his voice soft. "You have to understand it. You have to be patient. You have to earn its cooperation." He looked at me, his eyes kind. "Trust is like that. A person's spirit is like that. You don't break them to make them yours. You earn them." That was my father. When he died, from a heart attack that came out of nowhere on a Tuesday morning, the world just stopped. The color drained out of it. The sound was turned down. My own heart, which had beat in time with his, felt like a useless, hollow drum. My mother had passed years earlier. He was all I had. So I retreated. I sold the shop. I took the superintendent job because it came with a small basement apartment, and I walled myself off. The basement suited me. It was quiet. It was underground. It was a place for things that were forgotten but still functional. Like me. I stopped wanting. I stopped feeling. I just existed. I fixed what was broken for other people because I had no idea how to fix what was broken in me. So when that woman sat down on the train, her own world clearly shattering around her, and asked me to be her husband, she wasn't asking a man. She was asking a ghost. And ghosts, as it turns out, have very little to lose. If you believe that sometimes the person who needs rescuing is actually the one doing the saving, you should subscribe. This channel is full of stories that prove it. Back on the train, after my nod, she let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for miles. "Thank you," she whispered. The word was so full of raw, uncut relief it felt heavy in the air between us. "Okay," I said. My voice was rusty from disuse. "Husband, for 2 hours. What does that entail?" A flicker of a smile, the first sign of life beyond the panic. "Not much. Just exist. Next to me. Maybe put your arm around me if he comes over." "He." She gestured with a slight tilt of her head toward the front of the car. "My ex Julian. I glanced up. I saw a man holding court a few rows ahead. He was handsome in that effortless, confident way that always made me feel like I was assembled from spare parts. Good suit, great hair, a laugh that made the people around him lean in. A classic false hero. "He's on this train?" I asked. "He's going to the same place I am," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "My sister's wedding." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. This was more complicated than a random creep on a train. "He's not supposed to be here," she continued, twisting a small, plain silver ring on her finger. It wasn't a wedding ring. It was something else. I mean, he was invited. Before. When we were together. But when I ended it, my sister, she didn't uninvite him. She's too nice. She didn't want to make waves. And he's the kind of man who makes waves, I guessed. She gave a short, bitter laugh. He's the kind of man who is the wave. He crashes over everything. He has to be the center of it all. He can't stand that I left him. Not because he loved me, but because I was the one who walked away. He thinks he can still win me back. Or, failing that, ruin this day for my family. I looked at her again. Really looked. Her name was Alara. I'd learn later. She had dark, tired eyes, but they were intelligent. Fierce. She was dressed simply, in a dark green dress that was probably lovely, but now looked like armor she'd been wearing for too long. She was a soldier in a war no one else could see. The world saw a difficult woman who broke up with a charming, successful man. That's what people like Julian do. They build a public narrative. They make you the villain in your own story. I could see it in the way she held herself, braced for impact, ready to be misunderstood. Again. "Why?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. "Why did you leave him?" She was quiet for a long moment, watching the trees blur past the window. "My younger sister, Chloe, the one getting married, she's a painter," Alara began. "She's brilliant, but she's fragile. She has severe anxiety. For years it was crippling. Julian knew that. He knew how much I worried about her, how much I protected her." She turned to face me, her eyes locking onto mine. "He used it," she said, and the two words were colder than the rattling air conditioning vent above us. "He would make these little comments about her art, about her future. He'd frame it as concern. He'd say things like, 'Are you sure she can handle the pressure of a gallery show?' Or, 'This art world is so brutal. I just worry about her.'" He was planting seeds of doubt. Not in her, but in me. Making me feel like I had to rely on him, on his connections, to keep her safe. She took a shaky breath. It was subtle, so subtle no one else saw it. He was chipping away at her confidence. Through me. He was trying to control me by holding the person I love most in the world hostage. Emotionally. He wanted me to feel like I needed his strength to protect my sister. It was a cage, disguised as a castle. I understood. Oh, I understood completely. It wasn't loud, overt cruelty. It was the quiet, insidious kind. The kind that makes you question your own sanity. The kind that isolates you because on the outside, everything looks perfect. He wasn't a monster. He was just a charming man who was concerned. "The final straw," she said, her voice barely audible, "was when he offered to fund her first solo show. But he told me in private that his support was conditional. On us. On our future. He was buying my life with my sister's dream." She looked down at her hands. "So I broke it off. And I became the bad guy. The ungrateful woman who threw away this perfect man. My own parents didn't understand. They still think I'm being difficult. That I should have just managed it." She was protecting her sister. At the cost of her own reputation. Her own peace. She was standing in front of Chloe, taking all the arrows, and no one even knew. My father's voice echoed in my head. "You don't break a person's spirit. You earn it." Julian was a breaker. And in that moment, something in my chest, a gear that had been seized for 3 years, gave a painful, rusty lurch. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was her husband. "Okay," I said again, but this time the word had weight. It had purpose. My name is Leo. What's our story? A tiny, genuine smile finally reached her eyes. Alara. And I don't know. I didn't think that far ahead. That's all right, I said, surprising myself. We can invent it. How did we meet? And so, for the next hour, as the train rocked and swayed, we built a life. It was strange. The act of inventing a shared past felt more real than anything I'd done in years. We met in a bookstore, I suggested. I was reaching for a book on the top shelf. You were reaching for the same 1 inch. Too cliché, she countered, a playful light in her eyes. How about, I was a barista at this little coffee shop. You came in every day for 3 months. Always ordered the same thing. A large black coffee. You never said a word. You just read your book. I thought you were a serial killer. I laughed. A real laugh. The sound was unfamiliar, like hearing a recording of a stranger. A quiet, brooding serial killer. I like it. So how did we finally talk? One day, she continued, getting into it. You left your book behind. It was an old, worn copy of a poetry collection. I ran out after you, and you were so flustered you couldn't speak. It was adorable. We've been married for a year, I added, building on her foundation. A small ceremony, just us and a few friends at City Hall. We're saving up to buy a small house just outside the city. A fixer-upper. You're handy, of course, she said, glancing at my calloused hands. You can fix anything. And you, I said, looking at her, you're a landscape designer. You're going to turn the yard into a masterpiece. I love gardening, she said, her voice soft with surprise. How did you know? I didn't, I admitted. It just seemed to fit. Somewhere in the inventing, the strangest thing happened. We stopped inventing. We started actually talking. She told me about her sister's art, how she painted with such vibrant, hopeful colors. I told her about my dad's repair shop, about the smell of oil and the satisfaction of bringing a dead engine back to life. I told her about his hands, how they were strong and gentle at the same time. I was talking about him. For the first time in 3 years, I was talking about my father without a crushing weight on my chest. I was sharing him with her. And she listened. She didn't offer platitudes or sympathy. She just listened, her gaze steady and present. Then came the moment of seeing. The conductor came through our car, checking tickets. A few seats ahead of us, an elderly woman was fumbling through her purse, her face a mask of distress. Ma'am, I need to see your ticket, the conductor said, his voice impatient. I know it's in here, she stammered, her hands shaking. I just had it. If you don't have a ticket, I'll have to ask you to get off at the next station, he said, his tone firm. The woman looked like she was about to cry. Before I could even process what was happening, Alara was on her feet. She walked over to the woman, knelt down beside her, and spoke in a low, soothing voice. I couldn't hear what she said. I saw her discreetly slip the conductor some cash. He nodded, punched a new ticket, handed it to Alara, and moved on. Alara tucked the ticket into the elderly woman's coat pocket. She patted her hand, whispered something that made the woman smile a watery smile, and then she returned to her seat next to me. She didn't say a word about it. She just sat down and looked out the window as if nothing had happened. She hadn't done it for an audience. She hadn't done it for praise. She had done it because someone was in trouble and she could help. Quietly, effectively. This was who she was. The woman who stood up to a manipulator to protect her sister. The woman who shielded a stranger from humiliation. She was a protector. By instinct. My father's words again. You earn trust. You earn a person's spirit. My admiration for her, in that quiet moment, was absolute. And that's when Julian decided to make his move. Alara? I thought that was you. The voice was smooth as silk and just as suffocating. We both looked up. There he was, the false hero, Julian. He stood in the aisle, smiling down at us. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were cold, calculating chips of glass. Julian, Alara said, Her voice was steady, but I felt her tense beside me. I instinctively rested my hand on her knee. A simple, grounding gesture. A silent message. I'm here. His eyes flickered down to my hand, and his smile tightened almost imperceptibly. I didn't know you were bringing a +1, he said, his gaze shifting to me. He looked me up and down, a quick, dismissive appraisal. The message was clear. You are nothing. Julian, this is my husband, Leo, Alara said, her voice clear and firm. Leo, this is Julian, an old friend of the family. Husband, the word hung in the air, a shield she'd just raised. Old friend of the family, a masterfully delivered dismissal. Husband. Julian's feigned surprise was a work of art. Wow, Alara, you always were full of surprises. Last I heard, you were taking some time for yourself. The subtext was thick enough to choke on. Last I heard, you were a mess after I left you. Things change, I said. My voice was quiet, level. I didn't stand up. I didn't puff out my chest. I just met his gaze. Leo, Julian said, tasting the name. Right? So, Leo, what do you do? It was a classic power move. The what do you do question designed to establish a hierarchy. I'm a building superintendent, I said, without a trace of apology. A super, he repeated, a little smirk playing on his lips. Right? Handy, he looked back at Alara. So this is him, the guy you threw away our entire future for. A janitor. The insult was designed to hurt her, not me, to make her feel foolish, to suggest she had downgraded. Alara flinched. I felt it. And the gear in my chest, the one that had started to turn, locked into place. I squeezed her knee gently. I said, my voice still quiet, still calm. And I'm very good at it. I fix things that are broken. I let my eyes hold his. It's satisfying work. Taking something people have given up on and making it whole again. The double meaning landed. I saw it in the flicker of anger in his eyes before he masked it with another charming smile. He had expected me to get angry, to get defensive, to get into a pointless alpha male confrontation that he would have easily won with his slick words and public charisma. But my father didn't raise a fighter. He raised a fixer. He taught me that true strength wasn't about being the loudest man in the room. It was about being the steadiest. Julian chuckled, a hollow sound. Well, it's going to be an interesting wedding. I'll see you two there. It was illuminating to meet you, Leo. He walked away, back to his circle of admirers. Alara let out a long, shaky breath. Thank you, she whispered. You handled that perfectly. He wanted a fight, I said. I don't do that. What do you do? She asked, looking at me with a new curiosity. I told him, I said, a small smile on my face. I fix things. For the rest of the ride, we sat in a comfortable silence. My hand was still on her knee. Her hand came to rest on top of mine. Felt less like an act and more like an anchor. For both of us. The wedding was at a beautiful old country club. Manicured lawns, soaring white columns, the whole 9 yards. It was the kind of place designed to make people like me feel out of place. But I wasn't me anymore. I was Leo, Alara's husband. I was the man who could fix anything. It was a role, but it felt more real than the shell I'd been living in. We got through the ceremony. Alara's sister, Chloe, was luminous. Her new husband looked at her like she was the only thing in the world. During the vows, I saw Alara wipe a tear from her eye, a look of profound, fierce love on her face. She had saved this for her sister, this perfect, untroubled day. The reception was where the real danger lay. Julian was in his element. He moved through the crowd like a shark, all teeth and charm. He was laughing with Alara's parents. He was schmoozing with the groom's wealthy uncle. He was building his case brick by brick. I'm the good guy. I'm the victim here. Poor, unstable Alara. We sat at our assigned table, a little island in a sea of his influence. We danced one dance, a slow, awkward shuffle where I was terrified of stepping on her feet. You don't dance much, do you, Leo? She whispered into my shoulder, a hint of amusement in her voice. I told you, I whispered back. I fix things. I don't dance on them. She laughed, a real, beautiful sound that made a few heads turn. Felt like a small victory. Then came the toasts. The best man, the maid of honor, Alara's sister Chloe, who gave a sweet, heartfelt speech that made everyone tear up. And then, a fork tapped against a glass. Julian was standing up. I know I'm not on the official list, he began, his voice resonating through the room. But as a dear, dear friend of the family, and as someone who wishes Chloe and Tom nothing but a lifetime of happiness, I couldn't resist saying a few words. A knot of ice formed in my gut. This was it, the public execution. Alara went rigid beside me. Her hand found mine under the table, and her grip was bone-crushingly tight. I've known this family for years, Julian continued, his eyes scanning the room before landing on our table. And I've learned so much from them, about love, about loyalty, and about forgiveness. He smiled directly at Alara. Love can make us do crazy things, can make us passionate, volatile even. It can make us push away the very people who are trying to help us the most. The room was silent. He was painting a picture. He was the benevolent, heartbroken ex, and she was the crazy, volatile woman who couldn't accept his love. He was assassinating her character with a bouquet of flowers. But true love, the kind Chloe and Tom have, is about finding your way back. It's about realizing when you've made a mistake and having the grace to accept a second chance. He raised his glass. To second chances, and to hoping that even the most stubborn hearts can learn to open up again. The implication was disgusting. He was using her sister's wedding to publicly pressure her, to frame her as broken and him as the magnanimous savior willing to take her back. People were looking at us. At Alara. I could see the pity in some of their eyes, the confusion, the judgment. His narrative was working. Alara looked like she was going to be sick. Her face was pale, her knuckles white where she gripped my hand. She was trapped. If she reacted, she'd prove his point. If she did nothing, she'd let him win. My father's voice, clear as a bell in the silent room. You don't break a spirit. You earn it. Julian was trying to break her. I stood up. I didn't shout. I didn't say a word. I just stood. Every eye in the room swiveled to me. The quiet superintendent. The janitor. The nothing man. I looked at Julian, held his gaze for a second, and then I turned my back on him completely. I looked down at Alara. I held out my hand. My love, I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the stillness. They're playing our song. Will you dance with me? There was no music playing. The entire room was silent. Alara stared at my outstretched hand, her eyes wide with confusion, and then with a flicker of something else. Understanding. Trust. She placed her hand in mine. I gently pulled her to her feet. I led her to the center of the empty dance floor. I pulled her close, one hand on her back, the other holding hers. And we began to dance. In total silence. It wasn't a shuffle this time. I moved with a confidence I didn't know I possessed. I just led her, slowly, gracefully, our feet whispering on the polished wood. I looked down at her, only at her. I blocked out the entire world. The stairs, the whispers. Julian standing there with his glass still raised, looking like an idiot. In that silent dance, I was making a statement more powerful than any speech. My statement was, this is my wife, my world. Nothing you say matters. No one else here matters. There is only us. I was not challenging his story. I was rendering it irrelevant. I was choosing to dance with the one no one else would. It was another one of my father's lessons, from a school dance long ago. He'd seen a girl standing alone and told me, the measure of a man isn't who he fights, Leo. It's who he'll dance with in a silent room. After a few seconds that felt like an eternity, someone, I think it was Chloe's new husband, nodded to the band. A soft, slow melody began to play, swelling to fill the space our silence had created. The spell was broken. People started talking again. A few other couples, inspired, joined us on the floor. Julian, his moment stolen, his narrative shattered, quietly sat down. He had lost. He hadn't been defeated in a fight. He had simply been made small, irrelevant. Alara looked up at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. But they weren't tears of humiliation. They were tears of something else. "How did you do that?" she whispered. "You said I was your husband," I whispered back, holding her a little tighter. "I was just acting the part." "That didn't feel like acting," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "No," I admitted, my heart pounding in my chest, loud and clear and alive. "It didn't." We stayed at the wedding for another hour. No one bothered us. The tide had turned. People looked at me differently. Not with appraisal, but with a quiet respect. They looked at Alara differently, too. Not with pity, but with curiosity. The narrative had cracked. When we left, we walked in silence to the train station. The pretense was over. The 2 hours were long up. I was supposed to go back to my basement. She was supposed to go back to her life. The thought was unbearable. We stood on the platform under the dim yellow lights. The air was cool. "Well," she said, her voice small, "thank you, Leo, for everything. You didn't have to do any of that." "Yes, I did," I said. She looked at me, questioning. "I don't want to go back to being a ghost." I confessed, the words raw and honest. "I don't want to go back to the basement." I took a breath. This was it. This wasn't pretend for me, Alara. Not on the train. Not at the wedding. Somewhere along the way, it all started to feel real. "You feel real." She searched my face, her own expression vulnerable, stripped of all the armor she'd worn that day. "I live in a small basement apartment," I said, the words tumbling out now. "I fix pipes. I patch walls. My life is quiet and empty and gray. But today, with you, it was full of color. It was important." I swallowed hard. "I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know." She took a step closer to me. She reached out and touched my cheek, her fingers cool. "My apartment is 2 blocks from here," she said softly. "It's small. The walls are thin. And I don't know the first thing about landscape design. I'm an accountant." A tear traced a path down her cheek. "And I don't want this to be pretend either," she whispered. "Please, don't go back to the basement." I didn't. That night I went home with her. We talked until the sun came up. We told each other the real stories this time, not the invented ones. At 1 month, I was still living in my basement apartment, but I spent most of my nights at her place. We cooked dinner. We watched movies. We talked. It was simple. It was real. At 6 months, we found a fixer-upper. A small, neglected house with good bones, just like we'd invented on the train. We pooled our savings and bought it. I spent my weekends tearing down walls and putting up new ones. She spent hers in the overgrown yard, sketching out plans for gardens, her face smudged with dirt. Turned out she was a natural. At 1 year, on the anniversary of the day we met on the train, I took her to the house. It was still a mess of sawdust and drywall, but the living room was finished. I had strung up lights. I didn't have a ring. I hadn't had time. So I reached into my pocket and pulled out a simple steel washer. Piece of hardware. Something a fixer would have. "My father told me you have to earn trust," I said, my voice shaking. "And you have to earn a person's spirit. Alara, I feel like I've spent the last year trying to earn yours. And you didn't have to earn mine. You just walked in and brought it back to life." I got down on one knee, on the dusty floor of our half-finished house. "This isn't a diamond," I said, holding up the washer. "It's just a promise. A promise that I'll spend the rest of my life fixing what's broken, celebrating what's whole, and dancing with you, even when there's no music. Will you marry me?" She was crying, but she was laughing too. "Yes," she said. "Yes, you idiot. Of course, yes." A few weeks after that, we got a letter. It was from Chloe. She told us that Julian's new girlfriend had left him, and she had talked. She told everyone how he tried to control her, how he'd belittled her ambitions, how he'd tried to isolate her from her family. The exact same pattern. His charm had finally failed him. The truth had come out, not with a bang, but with a whisper that spread and spread until it was all anyone could hear. Alara was vindicated, but by then, it didn't even matter. We were too busy building our own world to care about the one that had misjudged her. I'm looking at her now. She's asleep in the armchair across from me, a book fallen into her lap. It's been 5 years since that day on the train. The house is finished. The garden is a masterpiece. We have a daughter, Lily, who has my quiet nature and her mother's fierce, kind eyes. I thought for the longest time that our story was about how I saved her. I was the quiet, competent man who showed up at the right time. The man who saw her true strength, who defended her in public, who gave her the space to be vulnerable. I was the hero of the story. But that's not the truth. The truth is, she saved me. I was a ghost, a man living in a basement, walled off from the world, convinced he was the kind who doesn't get a family, who doesn't get a second chance. I was switched off, numb. I was just a pair of hands that could fix things for other people. And she walked onto that train, a woman carrying an impossible burden, and she didn't ask me for my strength. She asked me to pretend. And in pretending to be the man she needed, I became him. She handed me a script and I found my own voice. She saw a husband in a hollow man, and her belief filled him up. She was the one carrying the world on her shoulders. Yet she was the one who pulled me out of the ground and back into the sunlight. I thought I was protecting her, but all along, she was rescuing me from my own isolation. My father was right. You don't get things by force. You don't break a spirit to make it yours. You earn it. I look at the steel washer she still wears on a chain around her neck. I look at the life we built, a life that started with a lie on a train. You earn trust. You earn a person's spirit. And sometimes, if you're the luckiest man in the world, they turn around and hand you back your own.